This is J. Krishnamurti's second public discussion in London, 1962.
It's really quite difficult to discuss with such large group. It really requires a small group who know precisely what they want to discuss and go into it thoroughly. With a very small group you can do that. But with a large group like this, I'm afraid it will not be possible. So perhaps you'll ask me questions and I'll try to answer them. And in the answering of them, perhaps if they're not very clear, you will interrupt and then we can explain it more leisurely and go into it more thoroughly. Would that be all right? Just a minute, please, just a minute. Would you mind very much if I took my coat off? Thank you very much. Don't want to take your coat off to some of you. Just a minute, sir. Let me talk a little bit more. Not that I want to talk very much. You know, to ask a right question is very difficult. Because in the very asking the right question, and if you know how to phrase it, you have already the answer. But the difficulty with most of us is, I think, we are not very clear what we want to ask. Because we ourselves are so very confused. And in that confusion we fumble, we try to put a question or two, hoping for clarity. I don't think, if I may point out, a confused mind can find clarity. I think that's quite impossible, because confused mind is confused. It can't find light, it can't find understanding. But what it can do is to find out why it is confused, what are the implications, the source of that confusion, and grapple with that, not try to find light or understanding or clarity. We must start with confusion, not with the desire to find understanding, not with the desire to clear up confusion. How can a confused mind seek clarity? Whatever it seeks will still be confused. So it seems to me, to put a right question not only demands a certain clarity, but in that very questioning, merely to try to find an answer to a problem is an avoidance of the understanding of the problem itself. if I have a problem, the instinctual response is to find an answer, to get out of it, to stumble my way somehow or other out of that problem. And so I try to find an answer. And I do find some kind of answer. Momentarily, that satisfies me. But the problem comes back again in a different way. But if I really sought not an answer at all to the problem, but to understand and unravel the problem itself, in that very process the answer is there. I don't have to seek an answer outside the problem. So with that, let's proceed. Yes, sir. Wait.
Am I right in understanding that attention is in time and awareness is in eternity, and that in laying the foundation by attention, we are led to our mysteries of awareness, which are timeless?
Please, may I request you to make the question brief, because I have to repeat it. I think the lady asked, if I'm not very clear that I heard it properly, is awareness something out of time and change within time? Is that it?
And attention is intention in time, and awareness time.
Is attention in time and awareness out of time? Look, you're not trying to understand what I'm talking about. We are trying to understand ourselves, not what I say about you. We are trying to see ourselves. We are trying to understand the extraordinary complex, the thing that we are, with all the subtle changes, with all the conflicts, urges, compulsions, the complex entity that we are. To know ourselves, if possible, entirely, totally. So, you're not trying to understand what I am talking about. We are trying to understand ourselves. I have said, to understand ourselves completely, a certain kind of awareness is necessary. To be aware of ourselves. We cannot be aware of ourselves if we condemn, compare, or justify what we see in ourselves. That's all. That's fairly simple. If I condemn myself, there is no understanding. I am not aware of what I perceive, what I see. I just condemn it. If I condemn somebody, I don't understand that person. Or if I compare that person with someone else, I don't understand that person. So, to understand ourselves, whatever we are, however ignoble, however noble, however marvelous, sensitive, subtle, whatever we are, to understand all that process requires awareness. That awareness implies no judgment, no condemnation, no comparison. Comparison, condemnation, justification is within the field of time. That is our conditioning. We look at things as a British or as an Indian or a European or a communist. That is our cultural, educational, environmental influence that conditions our thinking, our observation. If I am not aware of my conditioning, which is to compare, to judge, to condemn, to evaluate, to justify, and so on, so on, so on, then what I see, then I cannot see what is. I cannot see the fact. Surely that's fairly simple, isn't it? It is not something that you are trying to learn from me, but to see yourself as you are and to understand the extraordinary complex thing that you are, you must look at it without this background of condemnation, justification, and so on. And when you look at something without this background, then you see it entirely, totally.
I can't hear very well. There's a ringing and echoing going.
Oh my. What's that? Just a minute, sir, because he's gone to... You see, really, probably most of us, is that any clearer, sir? No, do you hear better?
I can still hear a ringing sound. I don't know if anybody else can hear it, but anybody else hear it? Well, we can all hear it, then I'll put up there if everybody else will.
It seems better than it's ever been before, the voice. Yeah.
Beg your pardon?
Your voice seems better than it's ever been before.
What am I to do? I think it is very important to understand this question of awareness.
Yeah.
Not to introduce into it something very mysterious. There is no mystery at all about awareness. It is infinitely practical and applicable to everyday existence. And if one is aware in that sense, aware that one is comparing, judging, evaluating, aware of one's taste, aware of one's contradictions, not condemn the contradictions, not say how am I to get out of that contradiction, but just to be aware of it. That is, to be aware of the fact, to be aware of the fact that I am a liar. What happens if I am aware of the fact, which is not to condemn that I am a liar, how terrible it is, how evil it is, how unrighteous it is, and all the rest of that nonsense, but just to be aware of the fact that I lie. Then what is taking place is, if you observe it yourself, you're not learning it from me. I refuse to be your teacher. I refuse to be followed. That is detrimental, that is a hindrance, that destroys all capacity in yourself. If you are aware of the fact then what actually takes place is that you come to it without opinion. You look at it afresh, not with the memory and association and the remembrance of the things connected with the fact. I hope I am making this clear. Therefore, you never look at the fact. You only look at the associations about the fact, the opinions. So that prevents seeing the fact. Seeing the fact that I lie. Or that I am ambitious, or that I am envious, or that I am greedy. Now what takes place? When I look at something without opinion, opinion being the past remembrance about that fact, then I can look at it without any hindrance. Psychologically, this is a fact. I can look at it without any sense of deviation, distortion. When I look at something without distortion, without opinion, without condemnation, then that fact itself creates energy so that I can deal with it. Do you understand? Then I can find out why I lie, what I can do about it. You understand what I'm... If I do not have an opinion, judgment, evaluation about the fact itself creates that energy with which the fact can be dealt with. All that is awareness. All that is part of time. Don't, please, to understand what is beyond time, you can't just spin a lot of words. You can't find it out from me. You have to work hard at this to find out. So, awareness implies to be conscious of one's reactions when you are confronted with a fact, with a challenge. Watching all your responses to it. the challenges of every day, not of supreme challenges. The little challenge when you are in a bus, when you are talking to the boss, and so on, so on. To be aware of your responses. Not only the conscious responses, the educated, modern responses, but also the responses, the motives, the compulsions, the urges of the unconscious. Because the conscious and the unconscious are still within the field of conditioning, therefore of time. The unconscious is the past, the yesterday, the accumulated racial inheritance. To be aware of all that. Now, to be aware of all that demands a negative state of mind. You understand? I think this is fairly clear now. I mean by a negative state, not the positive state of condemning, judging, evaluating, approving, denying, agreeing or disagreeing or accepting. Those are all positive states, which is the result of your conditioning. So to be aware, choicelessly, of this total process of the unconscious as well as the conscious implies a negative approach which is not the reaction of the positive, which is not the opposite of the positive. Is this fairly clear? If you wish to understand what the speaker is saying, not that you must imitate, agree, compare, justify, say, is he telling the truth or is he this or that, does the Bible say so, does the analyst say so. If you wish to understand what the speaker is saying, you have to listen negatively, haven't you? Negatively in the sense, not compare what he's saying, not justify what he's saying. What did he mean by this? What did he mean by that? You just listen. That state of negative listening is to be aware of your reactions and therefore understand yourself, not what the speaker is saying. What the speaker is saying is merely the speaker is merely a mirror in which you are looking at yourself. Now, this awareness implies attention, doesn't it? Attention. And attention excludes concentration. There is no concentration. Because the moment you bring in concentration, then you have engendered conflict. You have given birth to conflict. Because concentration implies contradiction. You want to concentrate on something and your thought wanders away. And so you are trying to pull the thought back, and so keep this battle going on. And when this battle is going on, you are not listening. It's much better not to listen. So, awareness is a state of choiceless attention. I think anyone who has little gone into it will find what is being said is an actual fact, not something that you have to apply to yourself because you have heard somebody say something about it. Now, without awareness and this sense of attention, to talk about what is beyond, what is the timeless, and so on, is all, to me, has no meaning whatsoever. That's mere speculation. It's like asking somebody what is beyond the hill. To find out, you have to climb the hill. But nobody wants to climb the hill. At least very few do. We are satisfied with explanations, with concepts, with ideas, with symbols. And try to catch verbally what is attention and what is awareness. That's why this understanding of oneself is really quite an arduous task. Not, I am using the word arduous in the sense, not a conflict, not an effort. I have to apply. I have to be really interested in it. And if you're not interested, it's all right, leave it alone. But if you are interested in it, it is arduous to pursue to the very end of it. Because all problems arise from this center, which is the me. And a man who begins to uncover this extraordinary, complex, subtle, living thing, which is me, has to be negatively aware, choicelessly to observe, to see. And any effort, any form of compulsion distorts. And therefore there is no seeing at all. Is this clear? Can we go to the next question, sir?
I have recently lost my wife. What do you mean when you say to free oneself from sorrow, one must shatter totally all memory? When she was dying, she said, "Death is the spark to life. How can I ever forget this?"
I've had a recent death. It has left sorrow. And the person who died said, "Death is living. How can I ever forget this?" I hope we can look at it factually and not personally. We've all had death. In the family, or we can see it in the street. Here it's covered with flowers, coffin, carriages, Rolls Royces following. In the East it's carried naked with a cloth over it and burnt at the most convenient place. You see it. And how is one to meet it without sorrow? That's the first point. How is one to understand this extraordinary thing called death? It's going to happen to all of us, and unfortunately we are all going old. And how am I to meet it? I don't know anything about it. I've seen it. It has happened to me. My son is dead. And I'm tears, loneliness, misery. And being unhappy, I run away. I seek a belief. I want to be comforted. So the mind, wanting comfort, finds an easy way out. Believes in reincarnation, resurrection, or innumerable assertions. Those are all escapes from the fact that there is death. A thing which seems to have a absolute end. Everything that I have known, all the experiences, my relationships, the conversations I've had, the remembrances, the pleasures, the pains are all in me stored up. The last words, the companionship, the agony of loneliness, separation. Now, all that implies sorrow. And how am I to understand death while living? At the last moment I can't understand it. Because at the last moment I'm too weak, too ill, too upset, too fearful, too nervous about the whole thing called death. I have to understand it while I have vitality, energy, capacity to think clearly. That's so, isn't it? Now, what am I to think about death? You see how we approach a fact? There is death, the unknown, though a lot of literature has been written about it. Lots of people have said there is life hereafter, and they have proofs, they have convictions, they have volumes written on it. And that's a fact, there is a death. Now, how do I approach it? What am I to think about it? You're following me? I hope I'm making myself clear. I have only one instrument, which is thought. I may have a feeling about it, which may be very deceptive. I may have what is called intuition about death, which is maybe my desire, my seeking comfort, my innumerable things which make me want something out of it, which I call intuition. So there is the fact of death, and I have to think about it, isn't it? I think about it. I want to find an answer for it. I want to forget, or I want to continue with all the memory of the last words of the things we have, she and I, and my son and I, my brother and I, and what we have done together. Those are all the reservoir of memory. There is the challenge of death, and I respond to it in thought as memory. This is a fact, isn't it? That's the only instrument I have to find out about something of which I really don't know. I know what people have said. I know my desire for comfort, which is translated into reincarnation, this, that. I am not discussing whether reincarnation is a fact or not. I am not interested in it. I am interested in death, not in continuity. We'll go into that a minute later. So there is the fact of death, and what am I to do? How do I approach it? That is important. My approach to the fact is important. Not my fear, my anxiety, my memories, whether there is reincarnation or not, whether there is a continuity or not, and so on. How do I approach this fact, which is an extraordinary fact? Have I made the question clear?
Why is it so difficult to live without the hunger to be? I am aware of my hunger, but it is still there.
No, sir, wait a minute, sir. We are discussing. We haven't finished this question. So, I look at the fact and I think about the fact. Isn't that what we do? And my thinking is the result of my fears, my remembrances, my hopes, despairs, loneliness. That is the background from which I think. Now, to look at the fact, can I dive to the background? You follow what I mean? To understand the fact, to see, to live, so that the fact will give me intensity to go into it, the vitality, the energy, I must dive to my background of fear, hope, despair, remembrances. Isn't that so? I mean, this seems to me fairly logical saying. To be aware of the fact without fear. Without saying, but I can't forget her, I can't forget him. How disloyal. And always the image, the picture, the photograph that is on the mantelpiece, on the wall, is in my mind. So I have to be free of everything I have known, to understand something which cannot be met with the known. Isn't that so? Have I made myself clear so far? Now let's proceed then. What we are afraid of is not the unknown, but losing, giving up, dying, forgetting, putting aside the known. Am I really so concerned about my brother? Or am I really concerned with my loneliness, with my emptiness, with my anxiety that to live alone in this dreadful, isolated world? The things we have done together, the remembrances, the things that have known. Isn't that what is disturbing? Not the unknown. That comes much later. So can I give up completely the known, give up the remembrances, the pleasure, just to die to it easily, without effort, the remembrance of the things which we did together? To die, to give it up without any compulsion, without any demand, without any motive. You're following what I'm saying? Because if you give it up with a motive, then you are still within the field of the known. So can we die? I'm using the word die purposely, because when we die to the known, then you are left with nothing, aren't you? If I die to the memories of my brother, of my son, what we did together, of the pleasures, the whole business of it. If I die to all that, what have I left? It is that unconscious understanding or knowledge or information that makes me afraid. I love my brother, my son. But the question of loving is another point. We'll leave it aside for the moment. And to die to all the memories of my son and my brother, my wife and my husband. First of all, is it possible? And if it is possible, and I say it is possible, not that you must accept it, if it is possible, then when you have died, what have you left about your brother? Nothing. You have the picture left on the wall. And that's a brutal state, isn't it? A ruthless examination of oneself. And which we don't want to go through. And if it is possible to die entirely to all the remembrances, pleasures, companion, and so on, then I have nothing left except the fact that I had a brother, a son, a husband, with all the emotional, hopeful, despairing remembrances. I have left with nothing. And that is death. And if the mind can go through that state, which very few can, because they're so terribly conditioned by their own fear, by their own anxieties. If one has gone that far, then there is the unknown. The unknown. And for the unknown to live not in the measure of time and thought and conceptual pattern of existence, in that state of these are words very difficult to describe, then you will find for yourself that you are living from moment to moment. Not in the sense of accepting the moment with all its tragedies, illusions and despairs and pleasures, but living with that quality of not knowing the next moment, and therefore living with an astonishing sense of immensity. Well, sir, I hope I have made somewhat clear the question.
Why is it so difficult to live without the hunger to be?
Right, sir, right.
Of all my hungers.
Yes, I understand, sir. Gentlemen ask, why is it so difficult to live with the hunger to be? You know, you ask that question without listening to the previous question. We are doing this. We have a problem. I have a problem, which is how to live without this hunger to be, to become, to be somebody. I've got this problem in my mind. I've been working at it for years and it's still there. And somebody asks a question about death. You don't listen to that question. You're so wrapped up in our own problems that we don't listen. If you had listened to that first question about death, you would have answered this question yourselves. Which is, why don't we die to a particular desire, to this hunger to be, to become, to be somebody in this world. You know, have you ever given up anything, especially that which gives you pleasure, or which has become a habit, just to drop it? Have you ever done it? I'm sure many of you smoke. It's a habit. And just to stop that habit, without effort, without compulsion, without saying I must not, all the better, just to die to the thing. Have you ever tried? Now, there is the hunger to be, the hunger for sex, the hunger for publicity, the hunger for fame, the hunger as ambition to become somebody in this world and in the spiritual world. Hunger. You know, this compulsive eating, compulsive urge sexually. Now, how do you meet this habit? I'm taking a very small habit, which most of us have, habit of smoking. How do you grapple with it? Now, I'll go into it, and you'll see. If it's not clear, please ask me, interrupt me. I don't smoke, but I see many people smoke, and it's become an intense habit. If they don't want to give it up, then it's perfectly all right. That is no problem. I like smoking and I don't want to give it up. But when I want to give it up, a habit which has been going on for years, what am I to do? How am I to give it up? Please listen to this. How am I to give it up without effort? Just to let it drop away from me. Because if I introduce effort into it, then you know what happens? Then it's a perpetual battle with that habit. One day I give it up, the next day I'm a slave to it. I keep up this game for years. So, I must first understand that I must not introduce into this habit of breaking something. I must understand the futility of effort. Is that clear? Then what happens? Then I am aware of the habit. Aware. I'm going to go into it. Aware of the habit. Aware that I put my hand in my pocket, bring out the cigarette, tap it on my nail or on the hard thing something, then put it in my mouth. Aware of every gesture, of every movement. Striking a match, lighting it, putting out the match and puffing. To be aware of every step, not condemning it, not saying it's right or wrong, I must be free of it, how dreadful, and all the rest of it, but to be aware without choice, step by step, as you smoke. You try it next time. That is, if you want to break habit. And in understanding and breaking one habit, however superficial, then you will go into this enormous problem of habit. Habit of thought, habit of feeling, habit of imitation, habit of hunger to be something. It's a habit. And the more you fight a habit, you give life to the habit. So, if you fight a habit, the fight becomes the habit, in which most of us are. We only know resistance, which has become a habit. But to understand one habit is to understand the whole machinery of habit. Because all our thinking is habit. So you find out where habit is necessary, like speech, word, and where habit is destructive, completely corrupting. Most of us seek comfort, call it God, have found, seeking, have found, which is what it means is really, they want comfort from this turmoil, from this anxiety, from this tremendous agony of existence. And we function in habit. To give up one kind of food, particular taste, and taste something else. You know, when you travel around the world, you have to take any kind of food that's given. You can't have a habit of food. But most of us have habits of food, habit of thought, habit of feeling, which all indicates that most of us function in habits. And you say, if I don't function in habit, what shall I do then? So, fear of being uncertain, which is really a thought of being uncertain. You don't know what it is to live in uncertainty, without going off into the deep end. Most people who feel intensely uncertainty become neurotic, which is merely the reaction of wanting to be certain. And thought, which has functioned in habit, It says to itself, if I don't function in a habit, what am I to do? How am I to live? And so it is afraid of being uncertain, insecure. Thought projects the fear of being uncertain. But you don't know what it means to live in a state of uncertainty, which is healthy sign, not a neurotic sign. So, in understanding the habit of hunger to be something, to become somebody, you have to understand this whole process of habit. Not just take one habit and try to be free of that particular habit, which is too fragmentary. You have to be concerned with the whole process of habit. Yes, sir.
As we grow in time, it seems our mind hardens into layers, more or less accessible. Is this stratification natural or inevitable?
As we grow older, not only our brain, but our way of thinking becomes harder, layers. Is this natural? Is that right, sir? Physically, we become more rigid as we grow older, less supple. That we can see, observe very easily. And you can do exercise or eat rightly and all that stuff, and you can keep fairly supple. But that's not the entire problem. How to keep young mentally, supple, alive, without hardening, without growing rigid, functioning in patterns of rigidity. That's really the issue. You know, it's one of the most difficult things to be free of an idea. To be free, please listen to this. To be free of the idea of God. Because so-called religious people are terribly burdened with this idea. It's an idea. You have received it. You have been conditioned in that idea. And you grow rigid in that idea. The Christian, with his cross and the Savior Jesus. That is the result of 2,000 years of propaganda. Propaganda. To make you believe or not believe that there is only one Savior. And that idea has been dinned into each one of us for 2,000 years, and we function in that idea. You may become an atheist. You may become superficially a Protestant, but that idea is still there. The idea of nationalism. the idea of right and wrong. Not that there is right and wrong, that's not the point. Just the idea, how it takes hold of us. So as long as one is living in patterns of thought, of life, ways of thinking, ways of feeling, mind must grow rigid, hard. You know, one of the most difficult things in relationship, husband, wife, son, mother, father, and all the rest of it, one of the most difficult things in a relationship is never to be certain of that relationship. But the moment you have a husband and a wife and a child, you are done. It's yours. You have set the pattern and you possess. And that possession is called love. And that attachment is considered extraordinary love, in which there is jealousy, anxiety, guilt, you know, the whole process that one goes through. And that becomes the hardening, the respectable thing. And morality, the respectable morality of society. So you see, all our ways of living, acting, thinking is in patterns. And naturally our mind grows hard. And mind grows hard also to a very great extent because there is conflict. That's really the essence of hardening of the mind, conflict. Now to be aware of that, of all this, is to have a mind that has no time that is neither hard nor supple. It is something entirely different. But to understand that, one must break every habit. You know, have we time? Just a minute, sir. Virtue, like humility, is not to be practiced. Virtue that is begotten through constant long practice of being virtuous is not virtue. It's not humility which practices humility. It is not love that says, I must love. There is no... The moment one is aware that one is virtuous, you're being destroyed by word, by consciousness, by being conscious of being virtuous. But there comes virtue without discipline, without effort, without imitation, without practice. And that virtue is humility. Humility, that state when there is no accumulation but always learning. Not about something, learning, in a state of learning. Sir?
My question is really connected with what you were just saying there, sir, about direct awareness. You said that when you have the idea of wanting to love, then you cease to love. There seems to be a barrier to direct awareness, simply to having the idea of awareness.
That's what I've been saying, the idea. The lady asked, please correct me if I am repeating your question wrongly. The lady asked, would it not be of value to look into the historical past with that awareness? That's right? I wonder what do we mean valuable? You know, it's like that word being useful. We want to be useful. God knows why, but we want to be useful. And we want to do the valuable thing. We want to look into the past so that it has some value. I think it's fairly clear what the past is, the historical past. You can read all the books, history books. But I'm not talking of history books. I'm talking of the past that is you and me. Because you and me is the residue of all human beings, whether they live in the East or in the West. The me is the historical process of psychology of the me, the structure. When you have gone through all that, examined, being aware, and you find what? You don't find God, you don't find the soul, the immensity of that. You find there is absolutely nothing left. Except What is generally left with all of us is untold memory. That we are the soul, that there is a God, that in us there is God, that we are the state, that there is no God. That we must do the right thing, we must be useful, we must be good, we must be this, we must not be that. When you have stripped all that, destroyed all this terrible respectability, what have you left? When you have stripped yourself the character which you have built up as being somebody in the pattern of virtue, in the pattern of morality of society, and one must break it up. That is real revolution, not the economic or social revolution. Because the crisis is not at the economic or social level, but at the psychological level, in consciousness. That is where the challenge, the crisis is. And when you do break it up, when you have gone into it, analyzed it, looked at it, being aware of the whole structure, you are left with nothing, you are lonely, completely isolated. And what value has truth, love, that extraordinary state of unknowable? What value has this in the world, where jealousy, envy, passing pleasures, beliefs, dogmas, passions — I'm sorry to use the word passion. Passion is a lovely thing, is a good thing, not the passion of ambition, lust and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking of passion, something entirely different. What is that that immensely, if there is such thing, what is its relation to our pettiness? None whatsoever. But we always want to establish a relationship with something unknowable, with something known. Surely, a man who is seeking truth — I'm sorry to use that word seeking, there is no seeking. Truth is not to be sought after. How can a petty mind seek truth? How can a petty mind, I mean by petty, ambitious, envious, psychologically confused and all that, how can such a petty mind imagine, conceive, formulate, speculate? What it formulates, speculates upon will still be petty, small, narrow. What is important is not to find truth, but to be free of pettiness. Then you leave the window open. Then you leave a space for that immensity, if there is such an immensity, to come.